It's our pleasure to introduce a keynote speaker for this session, which is Dr. David Messonnier, whose Easy Fusion is his company, but he has many hats. He's involved in many initiatives, an active senior for the Commission in other different working groups. Very pleased that he agreed to give a keynote speech today to initiate this session. So, welcome, David. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to give this lecture. I hope I'll give you as much pleasure as I had in preparing it, since it has been forced me to try to better understand this new, what I call the new world. I mean, we're living an epochal change in fusion, with, all this, profusion of a startup, this Cambrian explosion, this massive injection of private capital. It's a game changer. I don't know where we're going, but I hope we're going there together, and I hope we'll be successful. Okay, a short outline of my talk. What I will do is that I'll try to explain a little bit what is the private sector. I mean, or my understanding of the private sector is to some extent confusing and very varied, so I'll try to explain that, and I will focus in particular in trying to understand the main difference in the world of the small companies in fusion between the US and the EU, which seems to be the sort of the two extreme of this problem. I'll say a few words about the private sector, the public sector, the European one, which you all know, but is worth recalling a few facts. And then I'll try to go into the topic of discussion, which is how we can promote the private sector engagement, and with a few provocative statements, so then I leave the moderator to handle that with the panel. Something very simple. I mean, what is a startup? I mean, okay, it's small, it's new, but I mean, basically, a startup is an initiative. There is a founder or a few founders, and it's something that wants to grow and eventually, to some extent, want to go public. And an essential element in a startup is the funding, and funding goes in different stages. You start with, a lot of money. I mean, most of the people start, they ask, their family and friends, start small. Then you go to sort of seed funding with business angel, and then you enter into venture capital. So there's a lot of talk about venture capital. It's not the first stage in a startup. It comes early on, and then eventually you would like that to go public. Now, funding is indeed a fundamental or an essential element into that. But the first thing to understand is that outside the US, I mean, in most countries, companies struggle to find significant amount of money relatively early in their life. In Europe, there are, for instance, it's recognized that there are strong players into seed funding. But then the system sort of, I wouldn't say collapses, but really there is a stark difference. And indeed, I think you're all familiar with, startups that relatively early end up in the US, sometimes also in the Far East, because that's where they get the financing. This is clearly a weakness in Europe. Now, one way to understand the difference between this system is to ask how it works. And the best definition is to look at what are the investing looking for. Is revenue first or growth first? And to make it short, in the US, because of the large market, I mean, the investor recognizes that they have to pump a significant amount of money into the startup before it can produce a product that then may or may not work. But basically, they're prepared to invest a lot of money to take a lot of risk. It's part of the system. In Europe, we tend to go to revenue first. That is, we expect the company to generate revenue much earlier. It's a fact that at a point in time, I mean, the company must generate revenue by definition. But it explains, I would say, if that is a generic statement, I think it explains, in part at least, why there is this the US investor, we tend to take more risks than in Europe. There is a different approach there. There is clearly a major difference into the regulatory environment. I think we have been discussing that, and we are all aware of that, but it's a fact. It hinders, certainly, the development of any new business in Europe. And there is the go-to-market strategy. That is, if you're a company in Europe, you want to go into the different market. I mean, each market may have its own rules, regulation, and each time is a new step. Again, it's effort, it's money, it's time, it's difficult. Now, if we try to look at the system, there's a guy in MIT, Andrew McAfee. He's not the one that developed the software, by the way. It's just the same name. And he provided an interesting analysis. Now, this analysis applies to the startups, it's not to the fusion one. But he says that there are two gaps in the system. The first that you can see is that in terms of public investment, I mean, we're comparable, EU with the US. When you go to venture capital, there's a factor of 4. So, basically there is a 100 for each of the graph. The base 100 is the United States. So the first gap is with, venture capital funding, factor 4. Then between the venture capital and the unicorn, I mean, basically, is relatively similar. Indeed, if you look at the unicorn is a startup that gets a valuation of $1 billion. You can see there the US and the EU. The US is much larger, and in blue is the Silicon Valley. The Silicon Valley alone, basically in terms of capitalization, is 4 times the whole EU. Oh, that's a bit staggering. And that is a second difference will be when you go from unicorn to public company, that is company that have gone public, and you look at company with a valuation of 10 billions. Well, there you see the graph, there is another gap of 10. So when you look at the investment from the beginning to really the companies go public, you see that we have 2 major gaps. And that is certainly a significant difference between the EU and the US. And I would say when you look at the numbers of companies that I'll show you later on, you can see that indeed this is reflected in some data. Another interesting way to look at is the companies that when they go public, they reach a capital market value of 10 billion US dollar or euro. And there you can see where we are. Now, the usual graph is to look at $100 billion. In the EU, the number is equal to 0. This is also pointed out in the Draghi report. And you have here some numbers when you look at the average value of these companies. The average US company is 440 billion, in the EU is 31. So again, you tend to find this factor of 10 in many areas, and this is clearly a major difference into the EU and the US. Now, if you now look at the fusion company, you're familiar with that. I mean, 38 in the last count in the US, and in Europe, there you are. I mean, in Europe, I say, make the difference between Europe and the EU. So if we focus on the EU, as we may probably do here, I mean, okay, you've got 8 companies compared to 38. Now, all this data, by the way, is available now in the so-called F4E Fusion Observatory that has gone online, I think, 2 days ago. They've done a fantastic job. You want to have data, there you go. There you find it. It's interesting to look also, I mean, where the money comes from. Okay, there you have the graph that is self-explanatory. I mean, most of the investment comes from the US. China is coming up fast. And then the rest of the world, which is less than a quarter, with a non-negligible fraction in the EU. What is interesting is also when you add up all the private investment in the world. I mean, there is really a fantastic sharp increase in these last 5 years. And what is interesting is that, there we are. Is that if you look at, one easy criticism of fusion is that, fusion is 30 years away. You can have the positive attitude of Artsimovich, which says, when we want it, we will get it. And when I look at this graph in blue, I mean, I hope that we are there. We're getting there, so rather than looking at fusion 30 years away and keep on saying that, I say, well, we're doing it, and I hope that we really do manage this way. Another way to look at the system is to look at the investment. Those are the investment, the top investment in the world. I mean, you see number 1, okay, equally basically is in China, and then you got the US. But you see the numbers, we're talking of billions. You go to Europe, and again, the factor 10. The top 2 in the previous slide is close to 2 billion euro. Here is, the top one is 300 million. It doesn't take into account here the latest investment in Proxima. I apologize, but okay. It will not bring the amount to billions, unfortunately. It will stay to this factor of 10. So this is the situation. So if you conclude the remark there, I mean, clearly private investment is concentrated in the US and with, Far East and China in particular rising fast. There are a few that is normal in I would say, a startup ecosystem in any area, but a few companies dominate the system, none of which is in Europe. European lacks in venture capital funding. This is clearly fact, and an unfortunate fact, but I mean, we have to live with it. And anticipating on the future, I mean, there are a number of initiatives to try to improve the system, which I will be discussing later on. Now, these are what they call fusion company, mostly startup. Now, industry is much more than that. We discussed that yesterday. There is the supply chain. Olga from the FIA introduced the fusion supply chain report for 2005, came out last week. I look at it. There are some interesting figures. The one thing that she mentioned yesterday I would like to recall is the fact that you see the investment. I mean, we talk of hundreds, 400, between $300 and $400 million capital investment from this fusion company, which is good. And this is the FIA members, so their investment. And the second thing is the challenge, the famous, chicken and egg challenge. The companies need a supply chain ready. The supply chain wait for the company to guarantee investment. Okay, that is normal. It's progressive. That's the way it works. It's certainly good news. And more interesting when you go to the supply chain, that was also again shown yesterday. There is again here a stark difference between Europe and the US. When you take into account the investment into ITER, the European Commission funds 45.6%. The other countries tend to fund 9%. So this is reflected in the number of contracts placed by the domestic agencies. This graph does not include contract placed by the ITER organization directly or other DAs in other countries, but my understanding is that it tends to sort of exacerbate this trend that is in Europe today because of ITER, but it's a moment in time, even if it is spread over a few years. The supply chain has got a lot of money, so it's strong. The capital investment into the fusion company is small, and in the US it tends to be the opposite. Now, a conclusion of that, fusion market is clearly growing. There are a number of indications. Something that is interesting is to look at, forecast of growth. Now, there you find anything, and I've got two numbers there. One which seems to be reasonable. It seems to talk from, I think the starting point of the evaluation seems to be the investment in the supply chain by FIA member, 300 millions. And then another, which I found in several sites, where they evaluate the business at 178 billion in 2030. I must confess that it's a bit surprising. I've been trying to find out how did they work out this number. I don't know. I couldn't find. But okay, when you look at forecast, be a bit cautious. You can find anything. Last but not least, there are what I call the big players. Utilities, architect, engineer, promoter. And basically, with rare exception, fusion is too small a market and fusion is too far away. The rare exception, for instance, in Europe, we discussed also that yesterday, Eni in Italy, Siemens, there may be other I'm not aware of. But again, there you can see a difference in the US. Okay, in the US, you have, for instance, General Atomics, which is running D3D since years. We tend to look at General Atomics as a research institute this side of the pond. It happens to be a private company. And then you have other major players, like, for instance, Bechtel. I don't know exactly what they're doing in fusion, but for instance, they are involved into the management of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So they do have their foot in there, a big foot. Now, what they do exactly, I'm not familiar, but again, you see, when you look in terms of money and money generated, again, you find this major difference between the EU and the US. Now, what is the public sector in the EU? Well, the public sector, I think if you look at in Europe, they say the main source of funding has always been and still is the European Commission. It's a fact. Okay, it's good. And it drives still the research program. You're familiar. There are two DGs involved, and we discussed. I'll spare you that. What is, as I say, new is the national initiative at the national level. There are, I would say, initiatives, I think is the right word, in a number of countries. Germany, we talk a lot about Germany, but there are initiatives in Italy, in Spain, in France. The question today is how will they materialize? That is what will effectively really happen in terms of, one, money, and two, how will this initiative coordinate themselves with the European programs, the one managed by the Commission? I think it's a good question. In the discussion yesterday, we mentioned the fact that we have to be united. We can be diverse, but still united in our goal. well, this is certainly a challenge in front of us, but certainly fragmentation is the wrong way forward. Now, what are the challenges? If you look, the first challenge, it has been mentioned also yesterday, Europe are at the forefront of research and development. We're strong, there's no doubt. But if you look at where the private investment goes, okay, 60% in the US, 25% in China, 5% in the EU. This is a problem, shall we say. There is clearly a need to do something. I don't have the, the magic solution, but at least if you're aware of the problem, it's the beginning of the solution. For the startups, I think describe the US versus the EU ecosystem. I think the difference is there. I think we're all familiar with that. And then something very easy when I try to look at the challenge at the global level at the EU, I've got an easy job. I just quote the Draghi report. It has again been mentioned yesterday. It's a fantastic report. It's all in there. And basically, we're talking about that. Europe has tried, but it has not worked so far. So we better wake up and we better do something. And now if you go into the Draghi report, basically, and if you've forgotten what it is, I really recommend that you read the foreword. It's 5 pages long. It's all in there. It's really very good. Now, the first thing is that we have to refocus our collective effort in the innovation and to close the gap with US and China. And this is clearly, if you remember, the few slides and the number I showed, this situation applies to fusion. We have to do something there. And really is the main objective that they should look at. Now, the report also identifies what we have to do that. And one point I want to stress is that we lack focus. And to give again one example, if you look at the initiative in the US for new technologies, they got this ARPA and DARPA initiative. The US pumps there, more than 6 billion euros. That was the numbers in 2024. And if you look at the equivalent mechanism in Europe, which is the EIC Pathfinder program, I believe, we pumped in Europe 260 million. Again, you find this factor of 10. Well, we've got to close this gap, and we better close it fast. Now, coming to the conclusion, I would say we have not lost the race. I'm a convinced European. I believe we can do something, and we have strength. We were and we still are the leaders in R&D, so we have to capitalize on that. The Commission and its agency Fusion for Energy and through also, Eurofusion, they're taking initiative. They're not small step. They're not yet big money, but they're really step in the right direction. There is this initiative, Go for Fusion, to set up the PPP. There are the technology development program launched by F4E. The Energy Innovation Council, as you know, is starting to finance startup. That is something that is new, is very recent. There are loans from the European Investment Bank, so the Commission is doing things. You may think that it's not enough, but they're happening. There are initiatives also at the international level, so they're not simply speaking European, but also in there. Europe, the Commission is involved and is promoting that. As I mentioned, there are strong actors into seed and angel funding in Europe. So again, let's use that. And there is, also from all the companies, there is a strong lobbying, which again, politically helps. I can tell you that it creates also a lot of trouble for the for the Commission services, but it's okay. It's good. I think we need political support. And now let me come to maybe a few challenging statements. We not lost the race, but we should act. We should do things. There are recommendations by Draghi, and I didn't dare to put in writing political recommendation. Who am I to do that? But I would like to mention two things. Yesterday, we had the pleasure of having Christian Grudler, and he said, we have to start by having a strong political leadership. I agree. We don't have that. He mentioned he wants to, the program to be driven by the head of the Commission or a strong vice president, focusing on one strong DG. I think it's true. Today, our system, even at this level, is fragmented, is a fact. There are many reasons why it is so. I don't want to enter into discussion, but what the public sector can do unite yourself and start at the top of the Commission. And then, of course, try to coordinate with the national initiative. This is, for me, is a must. If we go now into two concrete suggestions that I can make, one is on the regulatory framework. Everybody has been mentioning that. Everybody recognizes that this is a problem, an issue. But if you look what the public sector do, I mean, effectively, I think it is quite happy to let the IAEA, the Vienna agency that has taken some initiative to do that. They organize workshop committees, and okay, the labs, the Commission send a representative, and that's it. Sorry, I'm a bit, black and white, but to some extent, that's what we do. Well, I think if you want to solve the problem, it's complicated. Regulators are, national association. I mean, they do not depend on the Commission, but if we want to develop a unified regulatory framework, maybe we should be a bit proactive. I don't know how to do that, but we have to do that. And the second thing would be in the support of industry. I mean, I mentioned to you there are a number of initiatives, but I think the public sector has to change somewhere its mindset, because for the time, as a taxpayer, I'm happy to know that they tend to protect the investment, to limit the risk. It is difficult to limit the risk and to start investing in startups. So I think that the public sector must think of, when it will try to develop tools to support the startup, to think like a venture capital investment. You have to think in terms of a portfolio. You will invest in 10 initiatives, and you hope that 2 will work out. The system doesn't work this way, but it has to work this way. If you try to pick up the winner, first of all, you will not succeed. And second of all, you will invest in none because they're all too risky. So I think there is a change of mentality there that is necessary. TDP may be a kind of initiative in that direction, I don't know. But again there, I mean, be prepared to take more risk and be prepared to accept failures. This is not the public mentality, but it certainly has to change. At least that's a personal view and will be for the panel to discuss. And last, what can the private sector do? That has been said yesterday, and effectively today, the private sector in Europe, I mean, with the exception of the recent startup that are just new in the game, the supply chain is, they've acted as suppliers, that's their job, fair enough. But I think when we talk of partnership, then I think industry has to start acting as a partner. A partner is to make proposals, is to inject something into the system. I think there was a comment from Gianfranco yesterday asking how much cash are you prepared to invest. I think that's the wrong question. You cannot expect a company to invest cash to be a funding agency. But the companies, they have knowledge, they've got people, they may have facility, they've got networks, they've got many things. And what I don't see today is industry at large coming with proposals, ideas, suggestions. So this again has to change. I think the companies to become a bit more proactive. I think that will be again a subject for discussion into the panel. And last but not least, there was a debate yesterday on 1 or 2 associations. Well, I'm here, so I take the privilege of giving my own view. I understand and I appreciate diversity. But if you look at where we are, there is a strong association, the FIA. They want to be global, but they are a North American institution. You look at the number of members, the imbalance, you find nearly the factor of 10 between Europe and the US, and they're strong in the US. They're the US association, and they do an excellent job by all means. Now, if we have 2, we will have 2 weak associations try to, do business or interact with the strong one. So that, for me, is not good. The second point that should be remembered is that in this public-private initiative that the Commission is setting up, the Commission will indeed, the plan is that it will sign a memorandum of understanding with an industrial association. Now, either these 2 associations fight one each other and one of them will win, which means that one will lose, which is not good, or the Commission will say, look, I'm not going to enter into this business, I'm going to push you to set up a 3rd association. So please, let's get 1 strong association today, I think is what we need. Tomorrow there will be space for more, no doubt, but today we need to be strong, we need 1. And the last comment, but this is more for, I think, the financial world, which is beyond my field of knowledge. How can we improve the situation for financing private sector, in particular the venture capital? If anybody has a good solution, please come forward. Thank you very much. And now I'm pleased to say that I've done my job, and I leave the moderator of the panel, Tony Donnet that will introduce the speaker and get on with the fight.
Okay, great. Thank you, David, for setting the scene. Well, it's very clear there's a massive potential in fusion. We have a lot of inherent challenges also in getting the private sector involved in a good way. And I'm very pleased now to speak for the next, well, about 1.5 hours with the panel about that. And I would like to introduce the panel members. So to start with Elena Righi. She's head of the Euratom Research Program of DG Research and Innovation. And, well, she basically brings in the view of a European policymaker at the forefront of the fusion research policy. So maybe you can come on the floor, and then I announce the next one. That's Peininger, venture capitalist, CEO of Pro Zukunft Ventures. He is specialized in deep tech investments, also including fusion. And then last but not least, Francesco Volpe, CEO of Renaissance Fusion in France, and also hands-on experience with driving private fusion initiatives. So welcome, panelists, take a seat. So we try to organize the session to first shortly present what is the present status of the field, then what are the barriers, what do we see as obstacles, and then towards the second half of the discussion, it's important to see whether we can find ways move forward to what are the ideas to go ahead. So to start with Elena, so how does the European Commission see the evolving role of the private sector in fusion commercialization? And also what initiatives or shifts are being prioritized to support private investment?
Thanks very much, Tony. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here this morning. The question is quite interesting, and I mean, we've seen that there has been a significant stepping up of the private sector in fusion, and this has been by no small means also thanks to the development construction of ITER, which has built a strong supply chain in Europe, but also by significant scientific results by facilities both in magnetic and inertial fusion confinement, which have brought to the forefront of politicians and the public the fact that fusion is not anymore the realm of small scientific laboratories, but really has grown significantly and quietly in the background in the last 20 years. So this is a very good development. Now, I think that, you know, in view of all of these developments, I think it's time for the EU fusion industry to step out a bit of their comfort zone and engage with the public sector to tackle together the technological bottlenecks that we all know what they are, and the need to be solved to build a viable fusion pilot plant. So David just said that, of course, the private sector cannot be thought to invest significant amounts of money into development, technology development. That's fair enough, but they have resources, they have industrial know-how of how things are done in a different way. And, you know, in terms of resources, in terms of experience, this is what they could bring to the table to work together with the public sector as partners, not as suppliers. So just not to wait for the contract to come your way, but actually engage to talk about how we are going to do things next. And, you know, work together as on solutions as partners and not suppliers. Because ultimately it's going to be industry that's going to build a pilot fusion plant, not the public sector itself. So, I mean, you're asking what initiatives or shifts are being prioritized to support private engagements. I've tried to make a note. I mean, there's a lot that actually has been going on. Okay, we talked about the publication of the EU fusion strategy by the end of this year. This is certainly a major step forward. And, the call for evidence is out, so please respond to it. Then there have been also at the level of member states discussions on important projects of common European interest for nuclear, and fusion technologies is one of the two work streams, and is supported by a large number of member states. We have had the recently published Startup and Scale-Up Strategy, which is another policy instrument at disposal. We have the Clean Industrial Deal, the Affordable Energy Action Plan. We have started to coordinate with the member states through the Fusion Expert Group, where also Eurofusion and F4E are observers, is a group of member states. So, I mean, this is not exhaustive, but you can see that in the Commission has not been idle in trying to put together an environment where hopefully in the next MFF then we'll be able to step up the engagement. So I think.
Thank you very much. It's very good to see the dynamism in the European Commission there. So let's go to Frédéric. So from your perspective, well, being in the management of a European startup, what do you see currently is the most critical gaps? Is that the access to capital? Is that regulatory clarity, technical partnership, or do you see something else which you need?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to excuse Milena Roveda because she had an unforeseen event. I'm trying to replace her. I know it's impossible. I'm sorry to destroy your diversity, but okay. Then to answer the question, all the point is relevant, but access capital, regulatory, I will come. But I think it was mentioned yesterday, it was mentioned by David just now, what is the lack of focus. We have to focus now. It's time to focus. I think this, we are feeling a lot of survey in Germany, in Spain, and so on, the national roadmap and so on. We have to focus. And I think ITER is a fantastic program. It was mentioned several times yesterday. We're creating an ecosystem. But if we are not focusing, we are also, it was mentioned by Carlos Hidalgo yesterday also, we have not paralleling, we will be lost. We have not to wait. And I'm convinced with my previous experience when I was working at CERN, you need a project. You need a project is federating all the people and so on. And we have to keep the things. Giving this, I think saying that, it will allow people, industry, not to be, as Elena Riggi said, not to be the supply chain, but be the actors. I'm convinced now is a time to industry to take the lead and to build the next fusion power plant. Then I think we have to move that. And then this is a thing, focus, and after that will be help to have access to capital because it will engage the main partners, the main industry, and obviously the regulatory. But I think the regulatory rules, I mentioned, it will follow. But we need now to have a leader and to start to have a project.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's switch to another CEO in this field, Francesco. So, how do you see that, and how do you? Well, maybe you can also make a comparison with some other countries. David did it already to some extent, but it's good to hear also the perspective from the private fusion startups.
Yeah, so we are based in France, in Europe, but our lead investor of our previous round is American. So. Yeah, by experience, I can comment a little bit on this topic. And I have the impression that in Europe, we consider ourselves the cradle of civilization, and this has repercussions in how we invest and how much we invest. And nothing more than a meme can explain what I mean. We will probably all have seen this meme about the US that innovates, China that scales up, and Europe that regulates. So there is a Tesla, there is a huge gigafactory in China, and then there is a plastic cap of a bottle in Europe. I think this is anecdotal of how investors work as well in the US, in China, and in Europe. So US investors are often the most visionaries. They see new technologies, new promising startups before others. They have a special intuition for that. China rapidly jump on these ideas and invest in similar initiatives in China itself, but increasingly also abroad. There is, for instance, a Chinese equivalent of Commonwealth Fusion Systems, and there are Chinese equivalents of the investors of Commonwealth Fusion Systems. Whereas in Europe, there are several, I shouldn't say many, there are several investors with much less money and a lower risk appetite or a lower inclination to take risks. That's, I believe, a major difference. Now, if I can comment geography by geography on what, in my experience, are some traits of each region. In Europe, I've noticed, to my surprise, I have to say, something that is stereotypically associated with Japanese investors. So Japanese investors have this reputation for willing to build a relationship. You will never get anything done with a Japanese investor at the first, second, or third call. It takes months, 6 months at least, sometimes a year, to get to know each other, build a relationship, and to some extent, I feel this is also true in Europe. And another thing which is true in Europe is social proof. It's true for any investor. Social proof in the sense that many investors, before investing, ask you, who else is investing? And they only really invest if they feel reassured that there are other investors, there is a group, and in this group there are some leaders that they trust, and so they feel, oh, if investor A is investing, I'm also investing. So they rarely take the initiative that we need so much, because it's the spirit that in the US allows for these big jumps. China is criticized for its poor, China and other regions in the Middle East, for instance, are criticized for their poor human rights, but in Europe and the US, some countries or some neighborhoods have poor records as well. So that's something that should be put in scale. And in China, another comment I would like to make, the stereotype is there is no clear line between public and private money. But this is changing, and many US investors, for instance, are opening offices in China. Silicon Valley started as a technical hub first and then became a financial hub. In China, there are several technical hubs, and now they're attracting money, including US money, and now there is a Chinese office, or actually completely independent company, but associated with Sequoia Capital, and is bringing some of the best of the two regions, US and China. And if I can have 2 more minutes, and then I promise I finish, again, on region by region, what are my impressions? This enhanced entrepreneurial spirit of VCs or investors in general in the US doesn't only bring positives, it also brings some negatives, I've noticed. So in the US, there are bigger oscillations. When they're excited on something, they are very excited. When they are fearful of something, they panic. In Europe, we are much more, the oscillations are much smaller, for good or for worse. And in the US, there is a bigger tendency to generalize. If there is a hype, if there is something fashionable, all investments in that area are automatically cool and worth investing. If I can close on a hopefully inspiring point, in the same way as our history maybe influences us negatively in how we invest in Europe, maybe we should use that same tool, history, to change, and we should think of our history. We should think of our patrons in the Renaissance, no pun intended with Renaissance Fusion. We wouldn't have had the various Leonardo and Raffaello if we didn't have the Medici and the Gonzaga sponsoring them financially. The modern equivalent of these are not the funding agencies, are the investors, public and private in general. We would not have had the expedition of Columbus to the US if the kings of Spain didn't give him 3 boats and a crew. One of these boats, by the way, until recently, and maybe still, is exposed in the harbor here in Barcelona. So we should go back to this spirit. We should, we had King's sponsoring the first astronomic observatory, the first volcanologic institute. There are a lot of firsts thanks to courageous sponsors or investors. It's in our root, it's in our history. We did it centuries ago. We can do it now again, because I feel Europe, as it has been said multiple times, is lagging behind new histories like the American dream or like the Chinese economic growth.
Okay, thank you very much, Francesco. Before we leave this first part of the session, let's go to Michael to also bring in the investors' viewpoint. Maybe you can also assess the maturity of and the risk profile of fusion startups, because you can compare that with other, let's say, startups in deep tech, AI, etc. So can you make that kind of comparison?
Yeah, actually, thank you. Especially thank you for inviting me, guys. Yeah, I would like to explain a little bit, maybe first myself. I myself, first I'm a physicist, and I was a specialist in one special technology. This was superconducting radio frequency. And when I stopped there with my PhD, I made technology transfer from the lab and from the university to industry, at that time to Siemens. And then my next step was to go to Siemens to establish a new business based on this. And then Siemens decided to quit these activities and also to get out of nuclear technology. We all know this story. And that gave myself and a companion of myself the chance to do a management buyout. And since then, I'm an entrepreneur, a founder. Actually, we founded a startup in the middle of the 90s. I think it was the first, actually, management buyout of Siemens, so a really classical management buyout. And this was interesting. Then we started. It was a good deal. At the time, it was, of course, was risky. The kids are back home, and we all were discussing, but we made it. And there were a lot of bets by Siemens people to say, okay, you will not survive next month, and then next month, over next month. So we did survive, and I think one of the point here is also a first, and I would describe it with me, to follow a dream. On the other hand, always have survival mentality. Yeah, so in a positive way. So you always are happy if the next day is working well, if everything works well. Nevertheless, you need a long-term plan, and this is, I think, copy-paste here what's going on fusion. Maybe first I would explain what I think on fusion and startups. So my next career then was, I was for 3 decades then managing director and managing partner of Excel and then RI, which is today RI, Research Instruments. In the meanwhile, we got, I think, contracts from Fusion for Energy for fusion contracts above 100 million euros. So we have grown. Today we have some 400 people and turnover of something 80, 90 million. So it's a company. Over the years, it also gave dividends. And actually, since now more than a decade, I founded my investment company, which is called Pro Zukunft Ventures. Also to say here, because people ask me what is Pro Zukunft means pro future in English. It's not con-future. I'm a favorite of future, okay? Just to say that, because many people have the difficulties with future. So actually with my dividends then we decided, and I decided actually not to give it all to my kids and to the family, but to reinvest into other activities, deep tech and interesting people. And this is my way of life. And actually, I decided, I think 2.5 years ago, after coming from Washington from a FIA meeting, to try to convince Frank Laukien of Bruker to do something to build up a startup. There was a good discussion also with our BMBF, with our ministry in these times. And so at the end of the day, Gauss Fusion was founded. And I also got my private money into it. Okay, it's relatively small, but for me it's a big. And I think this is my definition. I would not just to spend money into something, but it also would like to understand it and to participate in initialization. I think this is what I'm do. And in the course of the next months, I learned many of the startups in Germany, because we were also discussing a foundation and all these kind of things, industry foundation, Industrieverband. And it's really nice to discuss with all these guys, because there is the supplier chain, a kind of established chain like RI, and on the other hand there are the 4 startups in Germany, okay? And it's so lovely to talk to the guys, because they follow their dream and they are on a survival mentality road. And from that point of view, because this was a question behind maturity, all they believe things are mature. Of course, there's one or the other thing, the technical readiness level we all need. There is some optimism, of course, but also quite a lot of realism. And they all want to go their way. Yeah. And my point is that I love to support them. Maybe I have some. Base for magnet technology, because this is my way to come to, but the same with laser fusion, to support all of them. And my conclusion is there is maturity, there's enough maturity. The startups go so far, at least the one or the other, to say, okay, why do we need a kind of top-down EU financing regulation? We do it just on our own and convince big companies and try to get investors, small investors like me or bigger investors, in order to run the next milestones and then to build such a machine. Very optimistic, we all know this, but I think the plan is relatively good. So I can only support all these kind of things. And concerning Europe now and maturity, we should take this serious. Of course, technology beats everything. At the end of the day, it all has to function. But in order to come there, to achieve that, there must be some support to be discussed about, no question about, but there should not be too much control. And that's the battle we have to go every day. So I'm pretty much supporter, and I would say maturity is there. And let's go forward, and the best should win. And my last word here, my feeling is, maybe we all agree on that, because I said, say within 50 years, maybe 100 years, we all would agree to say, okay, fusion energy will be part of the energy portfolio worldwide, maybe a big business, maybe a strategic business like nuclear fission, and a commercial business, and how much quicker we can come there. So we have to watch out. Maybe my feeling is in 10 to 20 years, but we only can get there if we are all supporting it. Yeah, also from the public side, and not just telling to support. This is maybe a little bit the European culture, but simply support and try to get private companies, private investors into it who follow the same dream. So maturity is there.
Okay, thank you very much for this. Let's now start looking at what are the investment barriers. I would like, I come to you, Maya. Going to Elena, she already said that the Commission is, let's say, very busy in, let's say, getting ready for, I would say, also the new framework program and thinking about new tools. So what concrete steps is the Commission undertaking to de-risk fusion investments? And are there new funding mechanisms? Are there partnerships? Will there be policy adjustments? So can you say a little bit about that?
Thanks very much, Tony. Yeah, I think, you know, we talked about the fusion strategy. So while waiting for its publication and without prejudice to what will be included, of course, we are now trying to follow to the extent possible the recommendations of the Draghi report. And so we are preparing to deploy different instruments that I'm hoping will be tailored to different needs already in 2026, 2027, because we realize that if we wait already for the next MFF, it's going to be quite a long way away in terms of funding, and you know, before everybody gets together and understands what is going on, it will be already the middle of 2028. So we're trying to anticipate a bit and use the next 2 years to transition to a new way of thinking. So we will do it already during the 26-27 with limited budget. I would like to stress actually that the research and the legal extension of the legal basis on which we do this is amazingly should be approved on time in June by the Council of Foreign Ministers, and this for us is a first that I can remember, certainly during my tenure here. And it has, the member states have been incredibly constructive in the discussions for this extension. That shows also, I think, an alignment at member states level and less controversy in the nuclear field. And certainly I think the fusion discussions have helped a lot. So now to be a bit more specific, I want to just start by saying very, very quickly that we know that there are differences in the private sector, okay? So not everything fits all. So if I can make a rule of thumb, there's broadly speaking 3 categories of private sector that have different needs and ambitions. The traditional, I would call it large industry, which is a part of the ITER supply chain. They have a considerable know-how. They know how things are done in the sector, and possibly they have the capacity to invest on a more longer-term basis to develop the sector. There are smaller dynamic SMEs and startups that are also part of the supply chain and concentrate on what they do best, so, specific products, tools, solutions, and interact as needed. And there are the fusion startups that promise a complete package, a power plant solution. On time scales which I would put it politely are a bit aggressive. Good luck. I mean, we need a breakthrough, so I'm agnostic on this, but I think that the physics and the technology bottlenecks that are common to everybody eventually will prove that these timelines are a bit too aggressive, but okay. So so we have been working, especially with thinking the last 2 categories in mind. We are working with the European Innovation Council to develop a dedicated co-funded fusion accelerator challenge to be deployed in 26-27. Longer term, we hope to open also the Pathfinder and transition instruments. This obviously depends on the discussions on the funding that the program is going to have. So, but this is our ambition. And we are also preparing, we've been talking about it quite a lot, a private-public partnership with fusion industry with dedicated calls on fusion technology topics. This will start in 2026 based on the strategic research and innovation agenda that the core group of the European Stakeholders Platform will develop. So we are also looking, I needed to make a bracket. By we, I mean the Commission, and by the Commission, I mean the services that are competent to do this, okay? So there is no we RTD, they, ENER, whatever. We are working together to trying to find a common solution. So we are looking at how we tackle the regulatory issue, bearing in mind that the regulatory issues are competence of the individual member states, so we're discussing. There are the possibility probably to use regulatory sandboxes to test how far the framework can be stretched and simplified, especially when we need to deploy and test on the ground solutions for the technology bottlenecks. This is part of the toolbox that will be available. So, this is part of all of this. So for me, again, the message is the industry needs to have a key role. The private-public partnership is available to all three categories. If the industries and startups want to go alone, by all means, go it alone, and we have the EIC instruments for you if you need it. And through that, you'll also be able to access the STEP seal and the investors chain that is included in that. And there is already one example that has achieved this. And the other thing is, to the extent possible, I noticed that I have not talked about magnetic fusion technology bottlenecks, because many of the bottlenecks are common to technologies across the board. The tritium breeding, the fuel cycle, the shielding, the neutronics, and so on, they are common to different technologies. So to the extent possible, and bearing in mind that it remains a cornerstone of our strategy, we are trying to introduce also an element of technological neutrality in what we are doing. I think I stop here.
Okay, thank you. I see that Francesco wants to react to that.
If I can make a comment, since aggressive timelines of startups were mentioned by Elena, I think this is one of the most crucial, if not the most crucial, point of friction between the public and the private sector, or between large industries and small startups. And if I can offer my point on that, I think, well, first off, maybe ITER is not a good role model to follow for timelines either, or other, public projects. So we might want to think new timelines. But I will use the words of one of my investors. He told me, if you tell me that you will do it in 10, and you do it in 10, you will be punctual. If you tell me that you will do it in 5 years, because you think you can do it in 5 years, say it. Maybe you will do it in 7, but I don't care. I prefer that you say 5 and you do it in 7, that you tell me 10 years and you do it in 10. So sometimes it's important and useful to be a little bit aggressive and to use some self-imposed fast timelines. Otherwise, we will continue in a, with a mindset of punctuality versus doing something outrageous. So.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Frédéric can also give his view there. So how important are these public-private partnerships for a company like ours? So how do you see that? Is it important for your financing strategy? Are there signals needed from the public sector to let's say, strengthen this?
Okay, before answering to your question, I want to answer to Francesco. I think, yes, you have to be aggressive, but you have to be credible. I think at Gauss Fusion, we said fusion with integrity. If you want, we said it will take 15 to 20 years. we are not in the same timeline. If you said you will need 20 years, you said 5 years, and you know you will not succeed, I think it's not good. But it's a difference of opinion. I think we have to be credible also. We know what it is, the challenges, we know what it is to buy, to procure. If you want to, I know that it's a project, if you have to spend 5, 10 billion or 15 billion, you cannot do in 5 years. And we have not to try to lie to the people. Saying that, yes, fusion, PPP is crucial. It's crucial for a company as Chaos Fusion. We have to define the rule. I want to say that to Elena, yes, industry is ready to commit, maybe not in cash, but to commit in manpower, to commit in co-sharing of the risk. This is fundamental. To go now to PPP, I think we are speaking funding, we will need more money, definitely. If you want, the goal is to build quickly in Europe a fusion power plant, commercial, we need more money. I think we are now see a lot of money for defense. I'm convinced myself that energy is part of the defense sovereignty in Europe. We need more money. And saying that, Draghi report is mentioned by everybody. I think it's crucial that to say that we need more money and we need less regulation and to go. Then PPP is crucial. We need that. Saying that, I'm convinced, I think I said, that the lead should come from industry. One country maybe should take the lead, and we have to base our things, industry, to attract industry to work and to do PPP with this. This is definitely crucial. We have to define the rule. One thing I didn't say, I think we discussed between us, but IP, intellectual property, will be a crucial thing to discuss when we are setting the PPP. Every time we have a contract collaboration with an institution, we are spending time every time to discuss IP. I know that some people think it's not an issue. I'm very happy to hear that, but we are feeding lawyers, we are spending a lot of money with lawyers instead to put this money in technology, in development. We have to address this elephant in the room about IP. As a company, we need IP because we need that. We have to look at that. I don't know why the institution is fighting to get the IP, but this is a problem we have to solve. We have to discuss once and to clarify the things, because this is it's really a difficult thing every time we want to do a PPP.
Okay, thank you very much. Amaya, I was anyhow coming to you, but you want to react to this point, so please.
Just 1 second, because he looked at me when he said IP was, there are people that think IP is not a problem. I said yesterday, IP is not a problem in other green technologies. I didn't say it was not a problem in fusion, just to clarify. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anyhow, thank you for your patience. I was wondering from a banking and also risk management perspective, what kind of financing tools, guarantees, blended finance, green bonds, do you see are possible to make fusion more bankable and help the private sector?
Okay, good morning, everybody. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm the bad gal in the room because I come from banking. Sorry for that. Yeah, well, never mind. Yeah, well, from the bank perspective, nuclear fusion is not that mature yet. I know you said it's mature, but in comparison with other clean technologies like hydrogen or like carbon capture or like electric vehicles or this kind of things, it's still very young. Although research has started like last century or millennial, as we discussed yesterday, is still not showing any results where you could say, I could get money out of it. So we as a bank are already investing in fusion. Actually, we are investing in Renaissance. Probably if I ask Francesco, he would say, no, you're not under my investors, but yes, we are. So what we do is we invest through venture capital. We have already invested 160 million euros in venture capital funds that are investing in clean technologies. Among these technologies, you have nuclear fusion. I can have here a list of some nuclear fusion reactors. Accelleron Fusion, Pacific Fusion, Renaissance Fusion, TIA Energy, Excimer, Avalanche, Commonwealth Fusion Systems, SAP Energy, to name a couple of them, okay? So we are there. So what's the point? David already showed us the difference between the US and Europe. You say, okay, in the US we have Trump. Trump is not very keen on pushing clean energies, but Europe is. So what is happening so that you have so much money invested in the US, but you don't have that much money, private money, invested here in Europe? Because in the US you have philanthropists. Let me do some name dropping. You probably know Bill Gates. You probably also know Jeff Bezos. You probably also know Sam Altman, ChatGPT, just to clarify. Okay, all of these people have huge venture capital funds that are already investing in all these green or clean technologies, okay? We as a bank go and invest in these venture capital funds because they've got a portfolio of companies. They've got, I don't know, 100 companies, 300 companies. If one of these companies go bananas, defaults, then we don't care because there are 99 companies left that could just have a success. So the risk for us is very low. Instead, if we go directly to a fusion reactor, then the risk for us is very high because the technology is not that mature. So even if we ask the European Union to give us some guarantees or to just do a public-private partnership, it's too risky for us. We as a bank are also regulated. We're not allowed to give any debt just beyond 10 years. And you know how many years are you already developing your reactors. So the only way we have at the moment is just to go through these funds. What's the problem in Europe? Do you know any European Bill Gates? Do you know any European Jeff Bezos? No, we don't have this big, sorry? Does he already have a fund in which, yeah, it's one. So, yeah, well, it's UK, okay, never mind. We also are investing, Renaissance, we're investing in Renaissance because we're investing in lower carbon, which is investing in Renaissance. So, but the amount of capital, of extra capital that we are paying or putting aside because we are investing in American funds is huge. If we could invest in European funds, would be better because first BBVA is a Spanish bank. We would be supporting the European research, the European development in energy, and we wouldn't be paying that much capital that for our bank is also very nice because we are not an NGO, just to put it clear. So please, if you know any philanthropist apart from Virgin, then go and ask him or her to just do this kind of funds. We would be very happy to invest in them. Would also be much more profitable than investing in the US. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that insight. So, Michael, what milestones or de-risking events would you need to see from a fusion startup before making a significant investment? And how important is there also the regulatory certainty?
Yeah, let me comment maybe first off this subject of regulatory. I think political certainty, I think, is very, very important to have very stable, foreseeable conditions for the startups and for every company who follows a business plan, okay? Political stability. So this is self-saying. Regulatory, let me be also a little bit clear and maybe also rude. When I sit together with my oldest grandkid, 6 years, and we are looking to the planets, okay? And then he says, okay, I would like to go to Jupiter. And we all know it's not easy to go to Jupiter, but one can see that. I would never say, yes, maybe there's some physics which is hindering, but regulatory-wise, it will become a problem, okay? So nobody would think of regulation there. More realistically, if LHC, when LHC was built, this big accelerator at CERN, regulatory surely played a role, but it was very clear that regulatory will not fix the critical milestones. It just has to be done to the favor of the project, of course, to the favor of mankind, no question about that. So here I would say regulatory is easy also for fusion, especially for fusion. For fission it's more difficult, but for fusion it's easy, and let's just do it. But this, it cannot be a point of discussion. And maybe this is also a little bit European. So on the investor side, and again, I'm a kind of direct investor, not via funds. I have clear questions, and the startups all know this. I would like to list them. Show a clear business plan, long term. And business plan is very broad, with milestones, technical milestones or other milestones. One has to convince. I think this is possible here for fusion. Show me all the bunch of stakeholders behind, especially the supply chain. Show me that you are interacting with the supply chain, and not just by sending emails, but really by personal, face-to-face collaboration. Of course, you can develop all these things, but certain things must be stable and must be proved. So I'm a big fan of talking with the supply chain. There are many specialists on ICE level, and they have to, the startups have to prove that. They have really to show that. So this is, I think, very important. Partnership with public initiatives here, I think it's very important to have partners from the scientific side and also from the public side who stay behind and convince politics to go this. So all these kind of things, maybe I forgot the one or the other thing, is needed for me to say, okay, I pay €1 into it. Yeah, and this is the challenge, and this is the continuing discussion.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Let's go to Francesco. So, what is your company doing to become more attractive for institutional and also private or strategic investors? And how do you keep also over longer term the confidence of the investors that basically, well, because you also have these technical uncertainties which are inherent to fusion?
Yeah. So regarding strategic investors and institutional investors, we haven't done anything special. It just came naturally, and I think it's a natural evolution of a fusion startup as it keeps growing and it keeps delivering, that it attracts different types of investors along its course. It's also related to a change in risk profile and the fact that you need more and more capital. So inevitably, you attract different types of investors. So we didn't really did anything special, but yet our lead investor, our latest round, our Series A, or the first tranche of our Series A closed last December, was indeed an institutional investor, Crédit Mutuel Impact, so the impact arm of a bank. Now, what do we do in general to attract investors, not necessarily institutional or strategic, is to show that we deliver, so make our existing investors happy, because then by word of mouth, this also attracts more investors. We show to existing investors that we deliver, we update them frequently. We like to show and tell, so to invite them on site and show what we're doing. And show what we're doing also to future investors, of course, preferably in person, in front of the equipment, and show the people there are people behind these technical advances and these products that we are developing. And this is important, I believe, for everybody, including for investors. Another thing that we do is treat your investor as a customer. We are selling something, they are putting money, we are giving something to them. Portion of ownership of a company and a future return on investment. So it's important to understand what your customer wants. Is it a strategic investor? Okay, what's his strategy? Are they interested in electric vehicle? How is our HTS that we are developing for fusion relevant to electric vehicles? It's not a question of twisting the message depending on the audience, but rather emphasize some aspects or others depending who you are talking to. Of course, as part of a cohesive discussion. And you mentioned how to keep the interest alive despite the long roadmap and despite the technical uncertainties of fusion. Again, showing that you are delivering, showing that the road is long, but we are making progress and delivering bit by bit, sometimes by incremental, sometimes by more disruptive results. One thing, though, in this process is to keep expectations reasonable, because some investors are so eager to receive updates that they call you every month, and you have to remind them this is a 10-year journey, and from one month to the other, you know, you cannot always deliver something amazing, and inevitably some of these steps will be incremental. So as far as there is a mutual understanding that this will be the case, and yet these increments or sometimes quantum leaps keep coming, then we're all happy.
Okay, thank you. Going back to Michael, so are there any lessons which we can take from biotech or space which fusion entrepreneurs and policymakers can adopt to accelerate the private investment? Do you see there any lessons we can learn?
I actually cannot comment too much on those. I have a general feeling of that, but I never did some detailed analysis. But one thing is clear, we all should not invent the wheel again, okay? So let's benchmark with all these other markets which have shown success. AI is the same way now, so I think we can learn of all of that, and whenever it was successful, we should take the chance to follow it. Yeah, so I think this is the task to do. I never have seen some benchmarking these days, and I think it's worthwhile to do that. I think it's a must, also for the startups. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Going to Amaya, so how can fusion startups align themselves better with the ESG, so environment, social governance, and green financing, to become eligible for, let's say, funding opportunities?
Okay, well, I'll show you the money and you show me the results, I would say, so shortly said. Since this is not going to be possible because at the moment we're not having any results, then let's say we could start funding the value chain at least. Because, I mean, the value chain is something that is already showing the results. You need to buy to third partners your equipment. And those third partners are already delivering something and are getting some money for it. So we can start financing all this value chain so that at least those participants get the money to build the parts of the reactor that you are needing. This is actually very important because if you don't have the parts to just build your reactors, then it's not going to work that well, just putting everything in place. So this is something where we should start working at the moment. What's the problem with it? We don't know you. We don't know the companies that are building the parts that you need for just putting your reactors together. Why? I really don't know. There are small enterprises, there are a lot of them in Spain actually, and they don't approach a bank to look for financing. And I mean, they deliver within this 10 years, which is our maximum time for financing something. Actually, we already put a side bank to fund all these startups that are already giving some results that are not that big, that are still a bit risky, because I mean, they only have one provider or two providers, which is actually a bit risky for a bank. But the point is that if you don't raise your hands and you say, hey, here I am and I need financing, there is no way that a bank can go to you and say, hey, I'm a bank, do you need financing? I mean, we go, of course, to all things that have to do with food or with retail or with automobile or these kind of things, but we don't have you in mind. You are out of our scope. So if you please go to us and say, well, maybe the answer is no, but hey, here I am, I'm building something that is needed, something that's going to put Europe at the front of producing its own energy, and I'm very interested for what you're financing, then we probably start to knowing you and to give you some loans, and then we will need the guarantees from the European Union. Then we will need these public-private partnerships. So let's start with the value chain, and then we can just jump into the reactors themselves. Those still are on the venture capital side, but I mean, financing is financing either way, either with equity or with loans.
Francesco, you want to react to that?
Yeah, I wanted to second that, and I wanted to say that maybe this is an opportunity for Europe, because David said it before, that Europe has a strong supply chain, fusion supply chain ecosystem, but few startups, and in the US is the reverse. And if you go to the FIA membership, this is very clear, by the way. So there are many fusion supply chain companies in Europe. Investing in fusion supply chain companies is the new trend, is the new fashionable thing, because there is a perception that all the major bets in all the fusion front runners have been placed. I disagree, but this is the new trend. This is the new fashion to invest in fusion supply chain. Then here we go, here we have it. So we should ride this wave. We should take this opportunity, use this moment to attract capitals, not only from Europe, but from the rest of the world. This is a worldwide mega trend. And from that, use it as a springboard to get investments in fusion in general, not just in the fusion supply chain, but fusion in general.
Definitely, and there's another thing. Privately, I'm investing in equity in the American exchanges, because you don't have it here in Europe. On all these value chain suppliers, superconductors. I mean, there is the American superconductor company that's already listed. Since September last year, it grew 25%. I mean, it just outpasses any other equities that you can buy anywhere that there are common equities like Microsoft or something like that. So there's another chance to make an APO, go to any exchange here in Europe and start getting private investors to just finance you. I mean, it's very complicated, I know, because then you have to do a couple of things that are, well, you have to show your accountability and all these kind of things. But I mean, if you need the financing, just go for it.
Okay, thank you. Coming back to the Commission and the policy insight. So Are there any successful models already in Europe or maybe internationally? Well, maybe the EIC accelerator is one that could be better leveraged to fund fusion startups. And how is also Europe basically positioning itself against this global competition?
Thanks, Tony. Well, I mean, I think that Amaya has actually already started to highlight what is going on in Europe with respect to, for instance, to the United States. I mean, here in Europe, well, there are some successful models, but I think that they are one-offs. And so they need maybe to be streamlined. I mean, I see, for instance, there are facilities that have successfully leveraged regional structural funds for its development. I'm thinking, you know, if Tunis is one of them, so certainly this can be done. I mean, the EIB has invested in fusion quite a lot, actually, without naming one tokamak that is under construction at the moment. And they have also used funding from Next Generation EU through the National Recovery and Resilience Fund. So there are mechanisms in place, but they need to be exploited. And the private sector, I think, that is a bit reticent in going and doing this, because until now, maybe the public sector has been there to supply the funding. I mean, you talked about the accelerator scheme. Yes, it's successful. We want to, like I said, expand it further. We wanted to have a dedicated challenge for fusion technologies, which we are going to, I mean, we have limited funding in 26-27 because we're working with what we already have. And if we use something in something else, we have to take it from somewhere else, right? And we hope to expand it further to the other instruments of the EIC. I mean, the EIC is very receptive to what we are discussing. Obviously, as long as we put some of the money or most of the money, but that is part of the game, you know. Fine. If we have the funding for the next framework program, we'll be able to do much more. So there are already instruments. You know, also focused energy was awarded the EIC STEP scale-up scheme. So. But I think that there are no well-proven methods in Europe yet. Probably because this dynamism between public-private and these financing schemes are just at the beginning here in Europe, while there is already a tradition in other areas and in other geopolitical contexts like the United States, where it's much more traditional to work this way. I think that we need to make sure that the e-fusion industry can leverage funds through coordinated public-private efforts, independently, if they prefer to go alone, you know, maybe with guarantees, through the EIB, through venture capitalist banking, you know, if we try to work together. But I think that we also need to work together, you know, instead so far everybody sort of going their own ways. So the resources that we have, I think they need to be channeled in one direction. You asked me about positioning globally. This is an impossible question to answer. I mean, internationally, technologically, we are leading still. How long this will be for, I don't know. The gap is shortening, you're right. The gap is shortening, but we're still leading. So now we have, you know, we are in this transition period where we can, there's a lot of entropy in the system, there's a lot of confusion, but I think that the things are starting to coalesce and people are starting to see which ways we have to go. And I hope that if we really manage to put everything together, we can still lead well, we call it, it's a race now. There was a race to the moon, and now there is a race to fusion. And I think we should maybe look at it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. So before opening the floor to the audience, and well, again, you can ask questions via the Slido. We have a final round, a quick fire, where we'll ask each of the panelists to say in 1 minute if you can change one thing today to accelerate private sector investment in fusion, what would it be? And since Elena just ended, let me start at the very end and then work towards this way. So Francesco.
I would inject risk appetite in investors. I would bring back venture in venture capital if I had a magic wand. And if this can be done, if this can be literally injected, if we can offer a drug or a pill or something, maybe they should all do psychedelic mushrooms. So I should give psychedelic mushrooms to investors.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
So maybe I have to check for the question. Maybe I answer a question I didn't get. So my point is easy. Change mentality. From the very basics we have to change. Maybe we have also to question the European culture in that way. So this is not a quest to EU or so. It's a quest to all ourselves. Maybe, okay, you ask for one word or one sentence. This is my sentence.
Okay, thank you, Frédéric.
Yesterday, Marc Lachaise showed the evolution. What all this was done by public money from Aztec, JET, and now ITER. But we have to, ITER is a very nice contribution. If we've done a lot of things done by public domain. I think, as Elena Reggi said, we are the cornerstone now. We have to redefine. I think now we have to trust all together, to work together, industry and public, private and public. And I think now is time. I think I like to say, with all this evolution due to physicists and public money, now we have to give how to work together, but to give the lead to engineer and private money industry. We have to find a way to work together. But I think now, and Elena, you said also that first fusion power plant will be by industry, and we are not so far from that. And we have to find a way to do this transition, and that the industry and engineer are taking the lead in built in Europe very quickly the first fusion power plant.
Thank you. Maya?
So I would say approach to human beings. I mean, we are all physicists plus a couple of engineers sitting here in this. You're an engineer, yeah, I know, and he's also an engineer, but all the rest, we are all physicists, so please don't misunderstand me, but the rest of the humanity does not understand what we are doing. And you can read in all the newspapers, in the Financial Times, and everywhere that there are a lot of clean technologies just coming up. Actually, they are not coming up. I mean, they have been there for the last 70 years, but they are approaching the public in another way that fusion is doing. So put it in normal words and say something that my mother can understand and can feel attracted to fusion.
Okay, thank you, Elena.
Thanks. I very much agree with you. And that could be something I can do in a future life. But as far as I'm concerned, I think that we need to focus on a common goal. We need to coordinate and pool resources wherever they come from. We need to work together, each doing what they do best, each for their own competencies, and especially we need to trust each other. This is something that sometimes does not happen.
Very much. Very nice last message. So I'm now depending on Fusion for Energy. So you take over, Ray, with the questions from the public.
Well, we can start by maybe taking some questions in the room, and then we alternate to sessions on Slido. We have 19 questions on Slido, so we've got an ambitious target, but I think we can run until 11:10 just to give us a little bit extra margin.
Okay, that's very good. So I see already questions on that side. Sorry, in here.
Well, first of all, thank you. Outstanding panel. Everybody says that, but this was very interesting. So, Michael and Francesco, enlightening. Thank you so much for that. So, I know Elena just said that, you know, Europe is, in a way, edging technology-wise. So we are alpha ahead of the rest of the world, probably. And this, it's a gap that is closing very fast. Many people have said we need the money, we need the European Commission to believe in the programs and bank to follow in line and fund these opportunities. I know there have been many opportunities of public confrontation between investor, venture capitalists, and the EU or the Commission. A suggestion or a question would be, are there closed doors meeting between the Commission, commissioners, and venture capitalists? There are not so many. I mean, in the room of the fusion startups, there probably maybe 20, 25 people sitting in a room, hearing what they need from you and explaining them what you need from them. Making a plan, explaining it to people like Amaya, and then see how it rolls out of the room. Sorry, it's a bit lengthy, but that is a suggestion, and if it has already been done, well, I'll shut up. Thank you.
So who wants to react to this?
Okay, I can react very quickly. I mean, obviously, you know, these people know where our bosses are, and if they so wish, they can go and talk to them. I have honestly no idea if this is happening. We talk at our level. I know that the commissioner, our commissioner, and also, I mean, I'm talking about for Commissioner Zacharieva, but probably also Commissioner Jurgensen. I mean, they meet CEOs of companies and so on. So, I think it's a very good question, and I am not sure that I have the answer to that, but I mean, certainly they have the power to go and talk to them if they so wish.
This question is from Manolo.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to see that we all agree that there is a race for fusion, that we might be losing it, but that we have the potential to change that in Europe, no? And that we need a goal, and that can come from the European Commission, no? So we set a goal, we want fusion energy in the next decade. Now, only a goal is just nothing. We need also, this has to be supported by a milestones program or whatever other strategy, but I think I was listening here to milestones and also the milestone program and also milestones in the USA. It's not just a project, it's a milestones program that might be supporting from the very beginning different projects, but with clear goals, timelines, and maybe at the beginning you have several approaches, and in 2 years, oh sorry, you fail, but you got at least 2 or 3 projects that you support in the future. No? Now, if we want to have private investors, I think we need an attractive regulatory framework. Without that, you're not going to have it. We wish we can have it, but it's not going to be there. So without this framework, and I think there are many possibilities. One of them could be probably you secure a price for kilowatt hour in the next decade for fusion. We are doing things like this in Spain with solar energy, in France with nuclear energy, and with other sources. No? So I think there are some solutions. We need the European Commission to act, and act now.
Let's go, Michael, want to react, I think.
I fully second that. I think we can follow the model of Germany and we can make it a European model. And so Germany announced that it wants the first fusion power plant to be built in Germany in the next decade. I think Europe should announce that it wants the first fusion power plant in Europe. We are Europeans. I'm not Italian, I'm not based in France, I'm European. And if this cohesive policy and politics, there is a difference, can be achieved with milestones, quantitative milestones, cost of electricity such and such, but also with incentives, again, following the example of Germany, I think we can win this race.
Michael, you wanted also to react?
Only a small comment, actually, as I'm a German, okay. My feeling is a little bit that now, with all the challenges we have in the world, Germany is really rising up and finds itself, goes from transitions from neutrality to a position in different areas, including defense, for example. And, well, there are some words from the Chancellor to also be, positive and to be, maybe to have this kind of first Kraftwerk in Germany. And I think this is new, and this we should all take as an advantage for all Europe.
Amaya?
Let me say one thing about regulation. We as Europeans complain all the time about regulation, nothing personal, but we love to be regulated because then we can say, because of the regulation I cannot do this, and because of the regulation I cannot do that. Look at the United States. They are not regulated. Their regulation is very lax. And I mean, please don't ask any time for regulation. You should keep going and don't tell every time I cannot do it because regulation is not helping me. I know it's difficult. We are regulated, we're a bank, but don't ask for it because be careful with what you ask because you could get it.
Manolo, you almost aroused the full panel with your questions. So.
Actually, reacting to what you said, I think that what they mainly ask is an ease, simplification from the nuclear regulation of the fission sector. So I think that the request for regulation is qualified, which I mean, I sympathize up to a point. Then you think about it, you produce neutrons, you produce radiation, safety has to be maintained, right? So the devil will be in the details. But it's not, I want to be regulated, or I don't want to be regulated. The industry is already regulated. And what they're saying is too much.
So
there's a question in the far corner there. Or here, sorry.
Sorry, laser fusion. I know we always last. However, I think the VC discussion is misleading because the VC, and I'm coming for 20 years in the US and in Israel from venture capital. So I know what it is. It's a 10 years time scale they have. And the VC is good for the seed financing. But for Series A, you need the endowment funds and the large family offices, etc. So this whole VC discussion here for fusion is not the right discussion. We need to bring it a step higher, and this is a EU structural regulation. What you basically just little touched on it. It's about we need to enable the funds in Europe to be able to grow and have other tools behind it. And then we get the big funds in it. And that's why we all get the money from the US. So it's not a VC issue, it's a structural issue in Europe. And this should be the discussion. And by the way, we know what PPP is in the US because we are in the PPP in the US as a Focus Energy, a laser fusion company. And we are also in the German PPP. So we have this German PPP, know what it is. And we need to less bureaucracy in all of this, especially in Germany. We need to be careful in the EU not to have this as well, because this kills us. We need a lot of people just to handle all of these programs at the moment. And for a startup or a small company, this kills us, you know. And I think it's the same for the industry partner who are engaged in that. Thank you.
Make a quick comment just to say that on the point that VCs are only for seed. If you look at the fusion energy base, there are plenty of examples of VCs who have invested all the way through Series A and B. And just a couple of days ago, a Series A was announced by Proxima, led by 2 VCs. So I... Okay. All right. Okay, I don't want to go in a loophole. Maybe one very minor comment I can make is we always forget that the success of CFS was sprung by Eni, which is an Italian company. And so we always talk about VC, we forget about corporate VC. And in that camp, maybe the difference between US and Europe is not that big. But anyway, I don't want to start yet another long discussion.
Okay.
Maybe
there was a question in the far corner, Ray.
Okay. In the meantime, if you wish to look on Slido, you can also look at the questions that are posed, and you can upvote questions if you wish, so that when we come to that, we can deal with the most popular ones first.
Hi. So lots of funds are going to the defense. Laser fusion is part of the defense. So why during these 2 days there was nothing about laser fusion? Thank you.
Oh, that's a question for the organizers of this session. I think it's the organizers. So I don't know an answer here. Certainly not. No, okay, it's a good point. Yeah. No, it's very clear, and you can see that in some of the countries, like in Germany, let's say much of the money which is made available, also the plan, is basically technology agnostic. So they are also including laser fusion there. And well, as you know, then Germany has also 2 of the laser fusion-based private companies are there. But yeah, why it's not there, I think the organizers, maybe Mark wants to react there.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I think it's what we're looking for now, challenge and discussion. Maybe it's a good point for next year, but at least we haven't forgot to invite you, which is the beginning that you are in the radar. But clearly also we had to make some choices. We have already quite heavy panels. So let's take the point. We have a side discussion, but it's good you're here because you're igniting something, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. When you look at SMRs and advanced reactors, there's been this challenge of going from technology development to project delivery, creating a viable business. And money is flown into technology development from the private sector. You see the same thing with fusion. But to turn it into a viable commercial business, the technology has to work. You need to know the cost. You need to know the schedule. You need an EPC contractor. When you look at fission, EPC contractors don't want to take any project risk. You need an operator. No one's talking about that in terms of how you create a viable business. Money's flowing into the sector for technology development, but how do you start transitioning into project delivery and commerciality? Where are all these other pieces? Because no one's really talking about that yet. Thank you.
Anyone wants to react to this point?
Well, I mean, we as a bank, we only enter the projects when there is an EPC, where there is a FID and all these kind of things. But for that, I guess you have to produce some energy, because otherwise you won't be having an EPC that it's or an off-taker that's taking this energy. So I don't know, is the egg and chicken or egg and hen in the sorry, I am changing to German. Somehow is this loop that never ends, because if you don't produce energy, you're not going to get an EPC, and if you don't get an EPC, then you cannot sell the energy you're going to be producing. But first of all, please produce this energy, and so far I don't see any of these reactors producing any energy, and correct me please if I'm wrong.
Thank you. Any more questions from the public?
Okay, thank you. Today I've seen a lot of talking about how to engage European VC funds, also PPP. And I have a question to you, because we have, I just checked, average VC fund in US has more than double more money than European one. So if we want to engage the private sector in financing research or developing on the startups, we have to think how create more money on their side. So do you have an idea of that? Because we can do it either, Francesco was talking about the sponsoring of the new, like Leonardo or other Renaissance people who are very great ideas. So we can sponsor them by either public money or private. But private, we have to build their wealth as it is done in US. Currently, if Europe is buying a lot of services, goods from, I don't know, countries outside, the money goes there and they are developing technologies. So what I'm trying to say, we have to build wealth of our venture VC funds or invest more public money from European, I don't know, governmental funds in a simpler way, fast way. Do you have an idea of that, for that? Because if not, we can sit down and talk, but nothing will change.
The only practical suggestion on that is for VC funds or funds in general, investment funds in general, to reach out to a broader net of LPs, limited partners, and educate them on fusion. There are no sufficient specialized fusion or deep tech startups, in my opinion, in Europe, unlike in Asia or in the US. Those specialized funds tend to approach investors not just offering them a great return on investment, but also explaining fusion, with the importance of explaining what we do was advocated before. So yeah, that's what I would do personally. On the private side. On the public side is a political decision, and the only way to stimulate that is with the public discourse by a combination of lobbying and publishing on mainstream media the importance of fusion.
Since more than 30 years, I run a spin-in at the university at KIT in Karlsruhe. So I have a private organized company that is doing a public-private partnership for over 30 years. And this is more or less like living forever in the valley of death zone, because you never have money from outside, from anybody. You only have money from the fundings of state side. And the problem that I see that now that we come to a point where this, let's say, deep technologies that are developed together with the university have to come up to get financed in parallel to the machines itself, in parallel to the startups. And I don't see at the moment instruments that can do that or fulfill that.
Does the panel see these tools? Amaya?
I mean, from the private side, I already said, I mean, for us, for banks, it's too risky, and we are not allowed to take this risk to fund the projects that are still ongoing and are not showing any results. And it's not that we don't want to, we would love to, but as I said, we are regulated, and this time I'm saying the regulation is too strong, and we cannot do it. And the only way is through private individuals, private funds, and yeah, I already said, either you have very strong people that are committed to build these funds, and as we heard, we also have a regulation that's favoring all these kind of funds. Or, I mean, another thing or a different thing from investing equity is not going to be feasible at this moment. I'm sorry, but it's not. I mean, and everybody or anyone that tells you something different is lying to you. So you're still gonna be going through this valley of death a couple of years until any of the reactors on the world, naming ITER or any of the private startups, show any results more than one that we already had, and start producing some energy.
Yeah, maybe I think we have the last question in the room, then we go briefly online. Okay.
Thank you. I'm Antoine Lodreau from Thales. I would like to give, let's say, an old school point of view about investment, which is based on Thales' commitment in fusion. I think we also have to keep in mind long-term commitment and some investments which are not good for public release. Let me explain. We are involved in gyrotrons since 1983. If I take the common point between Siemens, Rode Schwarz, Variant, Telefunken, AEG, E2V, they were all involved in electronic vacuum device until the end of the 80s. All of them stopped their activities, and half of them were involved in scientific activities. So investing, it's also being a long-term partner, and I'm quite proud of this heritage from Thales' side. And what I'm looking to the future, and what I'm thinking about PPP and investment, when we are talking about money in fusion, we are most of the time focused on R&D, and R&D is partially publicly funded, and it's great, and I'm quite happy about the support we had from Euratom through Eurofusion, through KIT in the last decade. I'm very happy with the contract that I have with F4E to deliver gyrotrons for ITER and stuff like that. But in the same times, all the industrial investment we have to do is not recognized. I'm not saying that I would like money. It's forbidden in Europe. It is not in Japan. It is not in Russia. It is not in the US. But it's all the industrial means, all the training of people. And when I'm looking on what it means for us, the ramp up we have to do concerning gyrotrons, it's a lot of money. Just to give you an idea, a test station for gyrotrons, it's 10 million euros. Maybe from a mediatical point of view, or to be modern, it would be better to put 2 millions, 5 times 2 millions in VC for Lucio, for Francesco, for Milena, and to communicate about the fact that Thales is investing in the future of fusion. But in my point of view, this 10 million, it's the contribution of Thales. It is to invest in our industrial mean, in our people. More than 20 people in 2 years for gyrotrons. More than 20 people, from from technicians to engineers, for sure. It's money. When we will, and I wanted Thales to be involved in the Go for Fusion process, because I really believe in a PPP way of thinking. But in this PPP, we will have also to take into account what means the whole investment. And it's a lot of money. And why do we invest? It's also because it's based on a business plan. This business plan is based on our analysis of the market. And it's, at the end of the day, just we believe in fusion. We believe in all of you. We believe in startup. We believe in public project. And globally speaking, we believe in that market. But it is investment also, and it's money. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's very good to see that companies also invest in, let's say, knowledge. And well, basically, this is also what David was saying in the beginning, that, well, industry needs to partner. And so to see that you also have the responsibility to basically put efforts in there to develop the field. So very good. I think with this we are at the end of the session, so a big round of applause for... You want to say something?
Maybe Tony, I could, if with your permission, I could just run through briefly some of the questions.
Okay, sorry.
Maybe at this stage,
I'm
I feel to give some justice to the people, but I think this will be more for food for thought, because I don't think we can. So we had questions about the potential role that F4E could play in helping structure risk-sharing mechanisms. I think, well, Eleanor mentioned it in the context of the Commission programs, I believe. We had a question for you, Amaya, we won't have time to address, but why is Europe not fostering a stronger investment culture on the younger generations as an economic driver? Again, shouldn't we consider investing public EU money in startups? Diverting a small proportion of this funding would maybe have an impact. How can private individuals invest in the fusion industry other than buying shares in companies like Siemens? How can science and industry be connected in fusion deep tech areas? And for instance, do we have an example of a massive investment in a technology at a rather low TRL, but not yet any clear market priorities? And finally, what are the instruments necessary to finance long-term approaches on the industrial side? So they're all online. I'm sorry we didn't have the chance to address them today. Maybe we can find a way to do that after the workshop.
Well, it's good to see that this panel has given rise to so many questions. So, well, thanks for the audience for being with us. Special word for thank you for Elena, Amaya, Frédéric, Michael, and Francesco for being part of the panel. So thank you very much.
And could I just ask you please to return at 11:45? So now enjoy the coffee. Well deserved, I think.
Thank you.
So good morning from me as well. My name is Stavros. I'm Senior Policy Advisor in Fusion for Energy. I'd like to welcome you to this closing session. We have 3 parts. The first one, we will ask the moderators to provide some high-level key takeaways from the different sessions. Then we will have Director Marc Lassaise, who will try to make a quick synthesis of some of these high-level takeaways. Then we will ask Massimo Gariba to say a few words about the upcoming fusion strategy. And finally, Marc Lassaise will close the event. Thank you all very much for coming. And let's move. Here we are. So these are the 4 moderators. I'm stepping in for Jonathan Wareham. I'm not Jonathan Wareham, as you can see from the picture. So, and then I will call the other 3. So, you may remember the first general roundtable was yesterday, where we discussed with many different people how to harness the potential of fusion energy. So we underlined the potential role of fusion in the current and future geopolitical panorama. We noted, I think, that there was a strong competition from China, the US, and other countries, highlighted the importance of fusion science and research and the need for new projects and infrastructures in parallel to ITER. There's a clear need for more infrastructures, including neutron sources and material testing facilities. These seem to be critical for addressing some of the remaining technological challenges. And obviously, some critical technologies will also need to be addressed as soon as possible. I think many of the speakers underlined the importance of continuous fusion programs to keep industry engaged. They underlined the potential market opportunities for fusion energy and the interest from energy utilities that it was expressed at least by 2, EDF and Eni. Emphasized the benefits of technology transfer and spin-offs to other areas. That was certainly came from some of the big companies like ASG. I think everybody highlighted the urgency to put in place a European fusion strategy, and it was noted that it's important to try to explore possible links with investments or future investments, European investments in defense. So that was more or less the discussions from Roundtable A. May I call Belen to summarize Roundtable B?
First of all, I want to thank F4E for organizing these 2 very intense but fruitful days. Our session was dedicated to analyze how to build the tomorrow's fusion industry. We had an intense but fruitful discussion. We were using also these Slido pools, and I want to thank the audience because the audience was very active on this. So these are the main takeaways. First, we were trying to make an assessment of the supply chain. While the supply chain is recognized as a key strength, there are concerns about losing the leadership and the feeling about that maybe the industry is not adequately prepared to meet the worldwide demand. Secondly, what we need. So we need a resilient, diverse, and scalable fusion supply chain. We were discussing about attracting skilled workforce and fostering technological synergies and cross-fertilization. We were also looking at the European strategy. It is needs a comprehensive European strategy, including new facilities and projects That was highlighted by industry. We need projects along with a technology development program focusing on key enabling technologies and public-private partnerships schemes. All of these elements are important for driving innovation, investment, and the growth of the supply chain. And we were also discussing about key elements of the public-private partnerships. No? We have identified that we need, for sure, funding, trust, coordination, and credibility. So, fourth, regarding this European strategy, it should include targeted investment and an accelerated fusion roadmap. We were also discussing about how to engage companies in the fusion ecosystem, because this is crucial for achieving the technological leadership. We must attract companies willing to invest, co-sharing technological and commercial risks. We need to look at the business opportunities in that case and the demand, no? the market demand. And also we need to provide right regulations to facilitate this transition. Regarding SMEs, tailored support mechanism and balanced return of investment are necessary. And also, we were looking at the major barriers, such as administrative burden and the lack of long-term cooperation schemes. Regarding all these fusion industry associations, it is a clear message that it is preferred to have a strong and unique voice. It is recommended to converge, no? to have a process to converge. And finally, we were also discussing about the role of F4E. F4E is regarded as one of the main assets, one of the pillars capable of significantly contributing to channel the public effort and accelerating the technological development. F4E has the potential to enhance competitiveness of the European industry, leveraging this technology development program that they had put in place, also promoting cooperation with the private initiatives and supporting test and demonstration facilities. TDP is envisioned as a strategic instrument that facilitates early involvement of industry. And what we need in the TDP is stable and long-term policy commitment, funding, and sufficient enough human resources to put in place. And I think that is the end, yeah, of my summary. Thank you.
So, good morning to everyone. I will briefly present the main takeaways of our lively discussion that we were having this morning. It has been really an honor and a pleasure for me to moderate this session, which it was composed by 6 panelists with a lot of experience both in technologies and skills, so it has been really very, very interesting. And a special thanks to the audience, which it was fully engaged and it has really contributed a lot. So I think it has been already mentioned by the previous, no need to say that Europe is well positioned to lead in fusion energy. We have the knowledge, we have the facilities, and also we have been learning during the debate that we have also the students, the academia. We are really well prepared. We acknowledge that there are significant technology gaps that remains beyond ITER, which is still very low level readiness level for crucial technologies, and for that substantial investments will be necessary to bridge the gaps and make fusion a reality. One of the main issues has been also different technologies at different levels, how we will integrate, how we will put together so that we will go to the common goal. It has been addressed the need of R&D and new facilities, where our future workforce will be trained, how we will put in place all the research that is being done. The identification of lack of fusion technology hubs, We need to develop technology hubs to drive innovation and really foster collaboration. This is the place where we will put together all the different needs that we have. It has been mentioned in different panels also, the need for a comprehensive strategy with a clear governance. We need a project, we know what it's been, but we need to know exactly who will steer, who will put together all the different stakeholders. It is clear that we need an educated, a trained workforce. So definitely we need to invest in that. We should invest and support the pooling of resources in higher education, using, it has been put in place, some of them like Erasmus Mundus, specific masters, but it has been also put that sometimes we only look at very high qualified engineers. We need engineers, yes. We need physicists, yes. But we need also mechanical engineers. We need people in public procurement. We need people in contracts. So we should not close the things. We need really to educate people to contribute to this project. It has been addressed the fact of building a strong reputation for fusion energy to attract talent. Fusion is a part that is really, still is considered for many of them still like a long-term project, science fiction. This will never happen. I cannot embark that. So how we can attract this new talent, these colleagues, which in fact we are competing for the same people. Why a young engineer will go to fusion and not to biotechnology? Well, I think we should promote that fusion is clean, is sustainable, is something that it will really attract new generation. This is on the part that we were working on, the highlight the opportunities for a meaningful professional career. It was one of the questions by the audience. Will you advise me to jump on fusion? Difficult for us to say, we are here. Yes, of course. You have a huge opportunity. You will initiate your career as a researcher, but immediately jump in the industry and implement and see concrete results. We need to also to break this narrative of from always coming to lasting, long and high qualified professional careers. We need to call on these high-tech colleagues, those that they are looking on. This is something which it will be on high-tech, it's a breaking technology. It was a question for the audience on how much is AA. Of course, at the moment that you will say AA is in fusion, we will attract already 20% of the new generation. And it has been, as it has been spotted by many other sessions, we need an integrated approach, including all stakeholders from the very beginning. It has been very much, is the academy have to put, but how is the link with the industry? So we need to put into contact supply and demand. We need to have really targeted direction that we will be able to anticipate and foresight. And I would like to conclude on something that yesterday was mentioned many times. Draghi, Letta, I would like to go for another one, ATOR. I think for fusion, the AAA is very much needed. Align, act, and accelerate. And I will add maybe, I am not so arrogant to put another one on ATOR report, but maybe anticipate. So we need to foresight. We are talking now about shortages. We need to anticipate what we are going to need to make fusion a reality. And with this, I wanted to thank you, all of you for being here, and especially the colleagues from Fusion for Energy for inviting me, and it has been really a pleasure.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start with thanking F4E for inviting me to moderate this last session, which was very lively, very exciting. We got many questions from the public. And it was concentrated on PPPs and what can we do to stimulate the PPPs. And we had a number of observations. That there's a low level of startup activity and private sector investment in fusion in the EU, and this is a cause of concern. It's not only for fusion, but we see that also in other areas of high-tech innovation as AI and etc. Fusion is still in the very early phases of commercialization, But we have an opportunity to avoid repeating mistakes from the past, learn from missteps which we took in other fields, and try to do it better. There are already support mechanisms in place. It's very good to see that the European Commission is now thinking of opening various tools like EIC, Accelerator, but also the ESC Pathfinder to make it possible for private companies to apply for funding. And this is something which is not set in stone right from the beginning. But also F4E and Eurofusion together, and also ITER, have these knowledge exchange programs in order to bring the private companies, let's say, much better in. And then I would say the upcoming European strategy for fusion could play a decisive role here to enable the growth of private sector companies. And also there now there's this kind of investigation going where you can contribute. What I should mention here also, I am not sure whether it's on these slides, is that we noted that also the investments in the supply chain are becoming more and more attractive. And this is certainly one of the observations we made. Other point, we not only heard it this afternoon, but also yesterday, sorry, it's still in the morning, but industry must be involved in decision-making from the start, and we often hear that industry should be at the table in Brussels when new strategies are developed. Their input is essential, and we more and more rely on the industry because ultimately the fusion devices will be built by industry. But also a very important message that industry should act as a partner. It was very good to hear, let's say, at least one example from Thales, where you can see that the company is already investing quite a lot in order to be able to take a big share of the market in the future. So this is really the kind of developments which are very encouraging. The funding mechanisms must become more flexible and responsive. So Europe always has been working with this 5+2 year program. That's a very rigid program. So apart from the money which is going to ITER, this money which in the past always went to Eurofusion, and that's put in stone. I think Gianfranco here will agree with me that as a program manager, you basically are with the back to the wall, because if people come to you, I have a very interesting idea, I need money for that, then sorry, but I have a list of milestones and deliverables which I need to basically meet at the end of the program. I cannot put money in that. So in that sense, it's very good to see that although, let's say, the bad news for Eurofusion is this, the money taken away, but the good thing is that there will be tools which will be much more flexible, like EIC, there's the PPP program, so Go for Fusion. And I understood that already in 26, 27 that will be opened. So private companies, I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but at least these technology calls, they will cater for more flexibility. So very good to see this. So all in all, it was a very exciting session. I don't think there's more coming. No, that's right. I would like to thank once more the panelists for being here and being part of this panel, and of course also the audience for coming up with quite some exciting questions. So thank you, and F4E for inviting.
Thank you, Tony, and a big thanks to all the moderators. Now I'd like to call Marc Lassaise, F4E Director, for the first synthesis of the takeaways.
So good morning to all of you. It's good to see a room which is as full as yesterday. I'm from the same place, which is always a good sign. I would like to welcome also officially the head of the Commission representation in Barcelona, Manuel Shapiro, which is a sign of interest also from his side, and thank you in your busy schedule to be here. I think it's getting difficult now to summarize the summary of the moderators. I would like just to share a few ideas. And first of all, the aim we had with the team when we thought about this event was to bet on participation and diversity. And I think you made this event a success by your participation, by the fact that we interacted with the room, by the fact we ran some surveys, and also by the diversity. I think it's one of the first time I see the type of panel we saw before, with people coming from the bank industry, nuclear startups in fusion. And I think this is the type of diversity I hope it's useful for you also when you come back to your different organization. I enjoyed as well, and I think we can do more on this standpoint, listening people not from our sector. I think what presented Maria Fori about the French nuclear industry, what we heard from the CERN in one of the panels, what we heard from MESA are very useful. And we must keep learning from others, doing things maybe similar, but also very different. But I think learning from others is key. I will mention as well that we should not forget that we're not alone. I mean, as Europe, we have, I would say, competitors. So I think we should keep an eye also on what's going on in other different parts of the planet, because whatever strategy we're making, need to make sure that compared to the others, we keep a competitive advantage for Europe. What I take from the discussion might seem obvious, but I think it's good to remind, and it's good to let people know outside of this room, outside of the fusion community, that I think we align. I think we align that Europe is ready to play its share. I noted we align that the European contribution to ITER has a significant impact on what we do and on the credibility we try to build. I think we align that there is a European industry ready for fusion, still very diverse, maybe not fully organized, but there is a beginning, clearly, of a story which has been built for years now. I think we all agree, and it was reflected in the feedback from the panelists, that we must invest technologies and skills. And we all agree that there is something to crack. And this is, I'm at the limit of my understanding of the situation and clearly my remit, but we need to crack something about private sector and engagement. So if I have to, maybe to add a few points very practically, now, what for me would be a way to summarize all the key items that we can follow in the next month and next year. I was a bit surprised of one of the survey about what seemed a bit of lack of confidence now in our supply chain. I trust the European industry. And I think we have the chance to show that we are on time, on quality, on budget every day. And I think this is the first building block I would like to keep in mind. Maybe because I'm F4E, but I think if we keep delivering on time, on quality, I think this is fundamental in the success story we want to write in Europe. So credibility through delivery. This would be my first point. The other one is obvious. We need a strategical planning. We need a vision in Europe, and we need to align all the players in different parts of Europe. But this is something I know which is in progress, and some of you are contributing to. I think we have, in some of the minds here, in some of the organization, but I think it's time we share collectively a clear mapping of technology and a clear roadmap of technologies. I think as well, I was mentioning before, we should not be shy to learn from others, bearing in mind a very clear specificity we heard from BBOBA this morning. We don't have yet a market. Let's be clear, I mean, there is no market for fusion tomorrow. We're far to have ENI, EDF, and the others making money from our devices. So we need to keep that in mind as well, which is a clear challenge and a type of elephant in the room maybe. I was mentioning the funding before, and I think about the skills. Clearly, there is a need and an interest to work on the mobility in terms of skills across the university and companies. Another takeaway for me, which is important, is to keep promoting technology transfer. I think fusion is not living in splendid insulation from other technologies, and the fact that the learnings we're getting in fusion can be useful for other sectors, I think is helping us, and it's giving a stronger and a wider support to our actions. Of course, I won't mention the regulatory framework, and clearly to keep promoting the public awareness on fusion. And this, it may be my conclusion. I think that's my takeaways. I see a lot of people taking notes. You have yours, and they are as valid as mine. And they're even more valid because it's what you will take back to your organization. And from Monday, I wish you can share that with your teams. We were saying yesterday we have 10,000 people working in fusion across Europe. We have probably here 200 of its leaders. And it's all what you've done here is for you. So we will make available all the contents, all the slides, all the Slidos, whatever, because it's your work. And then I leave to you in your organization to see what share you can take and where you can make the difference. From a F4E standpoint, it's clear. We will take this to our strategic governing board. We know where we are in the pitch of fusion in Europe. We will keep playing this role. And I hope this roundtable is giving you also food for thought in your organization and to make altogether the difference. Thank you. And I will ask Massimo Garriba if he wants to share as well his conclusion before the end of this meeting. Thank you.
So thank you, Mark. Thank you for organizing this meeting. I don't need to receive a telephone call, but I've done something that I will explain you in a moment, so I need my telephone here. It's been very rich, these 24 hours of discussion, and I think that I can feel that the sense of purpose has been also quite shared. What is the sense of purpose? I mean, for me, the objective is clear. We are all here because we want electricity out of nuclear fusion. The ones that don't want it, please leave the room. Okay? Good. So, then I said, I listened to all the humans that were in this room. Unfortunately, I could not split myself into the two panels of this morning, so I stayed in this room. Apologies for that. But I decided that I wanted to ask ChatGPT something. And I asked it, is fusion just hype? And it gave me a long reply. But then at the end, which I invite you to ask, because it's an interesting thing. You know about the strawberry thing about ChatGPT. Maybe you don't, but doesn't matter. I will skip the strawberries. They were outside. The bottom line is fusion is a real and extremely promising area of research, and we are seeing faster progress now than ever before. But it's not a real term, climate or energy solution, and most commercial fusion plants, if successful, are likely decades away. So it's not just hype, but there is plenty of hype surrounding it. So I found this quite enlightening, and maybe it's something that we may keep in the back of our minds, because now I will go through a number of points. I thank very much the panelists and the panel leaders to have done their summary, but I will give you my take on some of the things. So one demand that came out yesterday was that, but for fusion we need a steady policy. Oh, my goodness me. I mean, we have a steady policy since the past 40 years. I mean, I'm hardly aware, you know, if you exclude the regional funds or the common agricultural policy, of a research policy that has so consistently drawn community funds out of it, and in such proportion. So, sorry guys, I mean, when you call for steady policy, I think that you have it. What there is not, though, is that because of all this money and because of all the people that have always been saying, you know, it will be in the next 20 years, 30 years, and so on, there is not political visibility. And this is what has been changing stepwise in the past few years. Now, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day from the Financial Times, and she was telling me, can you tell me something on fusion? It sells very well in all our articles. Yeah? So, I mean, it's something that is important. Then, the other point of consensus which I seem to have gathered here is that we all want a strategy. Yeah? We want something more than a strategy. We want a strategy with governance, which I think is very good. It's a good demand because, you know, somebody many years ago, and we were talking about something completely different, he says, yeah, it was somebody from the US administration, by the way. He told me, I understand now what your work is. Your work is herding cats. And a strategy without governance is exactly that, is herding cats. So I think that this is something that, you know, if we want to achieve what has been said, which is each one to do the best that they can do, you need to also agree that there is a proper form of governance and decision. Governance means decision making around what is relevant and what is not relevant. Then there is the other thing, the regulatory framework. This is one of the biggest confusion that I've heard in this room for the past 24 hours. So Elena tried to put a little bit of order in that, saying, yeah, but we are talking about nuclear safety. No. I mean, here people were talking about different things. They were talking about electricity market regulation, incentives, nuclear safety, all the things mixed up and even more. So guys, there is a public consultation open. Tell us, what do you think this regulatory framework should do? With the caveat that I heard, well, if you want regulation, you may get it, and then we will see about it. What I think is very interesting, and what I understand is finally happening, is the fact that there is, and I'm now talking about nuclear regulation, you know, the part that I know a little bit in the past few years of my career. There is a clear understanding from the competent nuclear regulators that they want to discriminate in the, let me say, standard nuclear regulation, what is really applicable for fusion and what not. I think that this message is getting through, and this I think is very important if you want to advance. Then if you go to you know, now I start to move towards the public-private part and so on. I listened very carefully yesterday to all the people that were talking about we need to reduce the risks. And I think this is an extremely important statement. And since, you know, 80% of my job is on the other side of the nuclear spectrum, I can tell you that everyone that builds a nuclear power plant wants to decrease the risk, and they've been frantically searching for models that decrease the problem, which is the big amount of money that you have to put in front when you build a power plant, that you recuperate, according to the IEA, not according to me, in something like 30 to 35 years, just to give you a little bit of operation. So after you have finished constructing. So you are not alone in the room when you want to you know, decrease the risk of the investment, and is, of course, absolutely fundamental. There has been movement, you know, for the people who were talking about regulation in the sense of electricity market design and so on, in the reform of the electricity market design that was done following the energy crisis in the past couple of years and so on. There are provisions that incentivize this type of large upfront investment, like PPAs and like contract for difference. They are now in there, and their mixture is also there. Is it enough? Well, if you talk to the industry, it's not enough. Yeah? So that's what people say, but it is a step in the right direction. Then you know, now I can move a little bit more into the private sector, which is, there was a statement that was done, I don't remember by whom, maybe by you, that said, startups rock the boat. Sorry, bad memory as usual. So, startups rock the boat, this is very good, is, I think, very welcome. And then this morning, yesterday, we've seen all these wonderful graphs which shows the exponential growth in investment in fusion. Let's get real now. Huh? You know how much the oil industry invests every year? No? 1.1 trillion. You know how much the conventional nuclear industry invests every year? Is estimated between 60 and 120 billion. So we are at between 1 and 2 orders of magnitudes away. Yeah? For those of you who are physicists and so on. Yeah? So this is where we are. Second consideration, I heard a lot about access to capital and so on. Let me remind you, and I thank David for the very illustrative picture that he put forward and so on, that the problem of access to capital, of course, is completely horizontal. It's not a problem of fusion. Not at all. Yeah? The first time I occupied myself of access to capital and venture capital for European industry and so on, I can tell you it was in 1998, previous millennium, when I was working in a completely different field. There was a certain hype those days as well. So this is why am I saying this? To say, again, you are not alone in the room. So don't think that fusion is so absolutely different from everything else and so on and so forth. The problems are the same, and they are structural. Yeah? They don't go away one day to the next and so on. So I have to salute the very courageous people that are actually investing and so on at this, let me say, early stage of the business. Now, and the banks don't know you. Huh? This sentence I retain from the lady of BBVA. Yeah? The banks don't know you, she said. Now, serial versus parallel. This, I think, is an extremely important subject. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit long, but I have done a little bit of homework, and I would like that we think a moment about this all collectively. Yeah. Serial versus parallel. So the traditional, when I was working in fusion in the 80s and the early 90s, you know, there was the sequence, jet, net or iter, and then demo. You know, this sequentiality is destroyed because the companies rightly say, well, we cannot wait 20 years between, you know, one and the next project and so on. I mean, what do we do in the meantime? I mean, I think this is very understandable. However, there is a little catch here as well, at least in my view. In order to make a significant technological step, you also need time to solve certain fundamental problems. You know, we talked about technological barriers and so on. So I think that we need to understand that instead of having, you know, the policy of having single machines, we need to have indeed the policy of constructing a fuel cycle, constructing the solution to certain problems to a series of machines and so on and so forth. And I think that in these terms, also the work of the startups, that maybe they will not want to invest in the fuel cycle because it's too difficult, or maybe some will want, yeah? This may change this dynamic, but maybe this is something that ought to come out clearly out of this strategy. Then there is this question of the public funding, because, you know, I think that there is different perception about public and private partnership, but I don't want to say very much about that. I will stick to my role, which is clearly the one of financing ITER. And, you know, the reflection about the financing of ITER and linking it to the community budget is a complicated thing, because it's probably one of the very exceptions of a project that goes through several financial periods. The Commission works in a different way. The Commission does an agricultural program for 7 years, X years, and so on, concludes the program, and then it moves on with another program. And this is not the case. This is a commitment that brings you over and over and over again with a obligation, inverted commas, to continue financing this and that. It's a very atypical thing. I can promise you that the effort to make certain people inside the house, I see Manuel smiling, certain people inside the house to understand this is a problem. So the question is the EU budget the right mechanism of supporting fusion? It's a question that one needs to have in the back of its mind. Having said that, we try to do our best to give all the money that is necessary to ITER, which remains the only facility with a Q bigger than 5 for a steady state period that will have to go through all, and maybe not all, because I'm not so sure that tritium breeding is really sorted out by ITER, by the way, go through all the issues that remain in terms of first wall materials and all these kind of things. So I think this remains, and of course there is also a big risk of competition. You know, if I have a startup that pays me 10 times more, why should I work for Fusion for Energy? I go to the startup. Huh? I mean, if I'm 25, this is what I would do. I mean, I'm 61, so I mean, I don't do it, but I mean, that's different. Which brings me to the role of Fusion for Energy. I heard lots of praise, so many of you must have been paid by Fusion for Energy to say fantastic things about that. I mean, this is clearly. But jokes apart, this is good to hear. Yeah, this is good to hear. And I also heard that some of your contracts are tough. Make them tougher. It's the only thing that I can say. However, I think that what emerged from this discussion is that there is a fundamental role of this organization, which is the translation of scientific requirements into contracts for industry. And this role, that is now ongoing since almost 2 decades, is absolutely fundamental and is what is the value of this organization. And I think that it has to be clearly understood. So what is the question that comes out of it? Let me say that instead of doing everything that I said after ITER, we do demo, and should we restart from scratch? It takes another 10 years before everything works? Should we have a gap of 20 years and so on? I mean, think about it. At the same time, you have to put it together with the question that I posed before. I mean, is the community budget the real budget that we should use? So maybe Fusion for Energy per se is not the right form, but everything which is contained in Fusion for Energy and all the knowledge which is contained in Fusion for Energy has to be put in a vehicle that can actually deliver that. That's what, again, I retain from this part. And then last, and I will conclude, is the fact that you know, we are not alone in the world. We heard about the Chinese, the Americans, the Indians, the Japanese, and so on and so forth. We are absolutely not alone in the world. And I think that you know, there is, and I can see it. You know, I will see it again next week when I go to the ITER Council. There is this idea that this is a project that puts all of us together, and so on and so forth. I mean, are we strategically aligned? Do we want the same things? Do we have the same value? I don't know. I mean, it's a question that we need to clarify for ourselves as Europeans. Yeah? Once we go to ITER, we are not Europeans anymore, but once we are here, you know, we are Europeans, we need to clarify for ourselves what do we want in this game. I mean, it's something that I'm not so sure that the strategy will be able to answer this key question, because it's again another question, you know, that you cannot restrict it to fusion, of course. Yeah, you have such you know, dynamics in place that of course it goes well beyond all of us. But I think it makes lots of sense to understand which technologies we may want not to share, which technologies we should do together. We have an example in ITER. I mean, the TBM is not part of the ITER agreement. Yeah? I think that many of us know this. Yeah? So why? Because it's considered in a different way and so on. So I think that there is a little bit of strategic consideration to be done on what is the level of collaboration and so on. And I'm not talking about ITER. You are not going to change ITER now. I mean, this is that. It needs to be built and it needs to work. And I'm sorry I was a little bit long. It's not usually my style, but I thank you very much for your attention.
Can I use this one? Because now it's time to conclude, really. I would like to ask all of you to give a big round of applause for the team who organized this event. A lot of effort. I wanted to have them on stage, but some are already preparing the exit and the rest, so it's been a big team effort with the communication team here, with Stavros, Ray. I can give a list of names, Martial, Aris, but I will forget people. So I think really it's been a collective effort. We enjoy that. It's been a bit of pressure for all of us, but I think it's important we pay tribute to them, and this was, I would say, homemade as well, which is important. Maybe the last word of conclusion, I was saying before, all will be available, including the first opening movie. If you want to use it, it's perfectly feasible. All the debates will be on the YouTube channel of Fusion for Energy, so feel free to use it as well. And all the results, and this is really your material. Then as a conclusion as well, we will send you a survey in the coming days. So please take a bit of time because it's really useful to understand what went well, what could be improved. And some of you asked the question, are we going to do another one? The answer is most probably yes. The same format, maybe not, because we need to make sure that we stick also to what you expect, what's F4E ambition. So please really answer the survey, but I'm sure we will see each other very soon. Some of you in some factories, other on ITER sites. You're always welcome in Barcelona premises. I meet people in Brussels. I think we're all in Europe, and I really wish you a safe come back home in this Friday afternoon. Thank you, really. Thank you really much. And we provide food as well, and then have a safe return.